Welcome to Off the 99, a weekly radio show about news, politics, and all things Merced, brought to you by the Merced Sun Star and KYOS. I'm your host, Jonah Owen Lamb, with my co-host Danielle Gaines, and this is Off the 99.
It's a weighty issue in Merced County and the San Joaquin Valley. The rate of obesity is ever growing, and it starts early. More than 37% of Merced County mothers get late or no prenatal care, and the breastfeeding rates of new mothers in Merced County's two hospitals are abysmally low when compared to the other parts of the state, even though both measures can improve an infant's health.
1 in 5 Merced Union High School district students are obese. 40% are either obese or overweight, and it doesn't stop there. 65% of the adults in the valley are overweight or obese as well.
That the waistlines of children and adults have grown is well known, but the spotlight focused on the issue of obesity has grown brighter in recent months. There are TV shows, news stories, and even White House task forces.
In Merced, more than one group is at work creating a leaner, meaner populace. In this edition of Off the 99, we spoke with Emily Lindsay, a board-certified lactation consultant, and Don Avila, one of Merced College's biggest losers, to see what they're doing to battle the bulge. This is Off the 99. Welcome to Off the 99.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell our audience who you are and what it is that you do around town?
Sure. My name's Emily Lindsay. I'm a board-certified lactation consultant, and most of the time I am in my own private practice before and after baby, but in my spare time I am the chairperson for the Merced County Breastfeeding Coalition and the communications coordinator for the California Breastfeeding Coalition, and then sit as the Western Regional Rep for the United States Breastfeeding Committee, which keeps me very busy.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you can fit all that on your business cards.
No. Lots of initials. Kind of the inside joke, the more initials you have, maybe the less you know. I don't know. We'll see how that goes.
What is a lactation consultant?
What is a lactation consultant? So by definition, basically I'll help mothers with either breastfeeding questions during pregnancy and then also postpartum if she's got issues. Sometimes it might be around pumping, sometimes it might be around feeding. A lot of times it's just basic questions and early support. So a lot of the phone calls I get, I resolve with just a phone call. I probably only see about maybe half of the mothers that actually call me.
Mm-hmm. So I met you and learned about you because you won a Cultivator Award from the Central California Regional Obesity Prevention Project.
Program. What a mouthful.
Program.
Yes.
When did you get that award and why did you receive it?
So I was actually nominated the year before and then nominated again regionally for the award, and it was mainly because of the work I had done throughout the whole region, focusing starting in Merced County but then also assisting other regions. I actually did work on a state grant that went all the way down to Kern County and all the way up past Stanislaus County, and we did a lot of work within the hospital systems and then during that time with both Merced County hospitals, really having them take a hard look at their policies and procedures, because everybody wants to talk about why it's their patient's problem and why it's a socioeconomic status issue and a lack of patient education issue, and it really comes down to that's not what it is.
Why a lack of breastfeeding?
Exactly.
Is all of those things. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so Merced County in particular has a very high rate of any breastfeeding, but then when you look at our exclusive breastfeeding in the hospital, which most of the times is a 24-hour stay, we rank some of the worst in the state. And so it was working with those hospitals and saying, okay, what policies and procedures are getting in your way? And one of the first things we did, because it's an easy, quick win, as we define it, is getting rid of the formula bags. And so we actually became one of the counties in California that first said, okay, our hospitals are not going to have formula bags. Las Banas started it on their own. We just kind of dovetailed in and really supported them in doing it.
And tell our listeners what formula bags are.
Formula bags are a gift bag from formula manufacturing companies, and it's basically the only freebie that hospitals get when you think of food or medical supplies. The formula companies come in and say, here you go, market our brand, and we will give you not only all free formula for infants in your ward, but then also gifts to take home. And it's highly correlated to a lack of breastfeeding, both in duration and exclusivity.
Mm-hmm. Because even if you went in as a mother, not anymore, but before, and you said, I want to exclusively breastfeed my baby, you would still be sent home with a can of formula, right?
More than even a can. It would be a fancy little black diaper bag with their logo on it that was filled with usually the ready-to-feed formula because it's quick and it's easy. So it very much was a marketing ploy. For mothers that might be worried in the middle of the night, it was something they could go to very easily, very quickly, and then subsequently jeopardize that breastfeeding relationship right out the door. And so they were smart about it, and they knew what it did. And many times moms would walk out the door not with one bag, but 2 and sometimes 3, even though they had been exclusively breastfeeding in the hospital. It was like, here's our gift to you. So we worked on replacing those gifts. Here in Merced County, Las Banas actually gives out their own very nice bag. It says Sutter, and it has a bunch of different information in it. Mercy didn't want to put money into it, which is fine. There's nothing that says we have to give something out, but we chose to look for something, and what actually it was replaced with are the first 5 parent education boxes. So what better way to send a parent, especially a new parent, home, but with pamphlets and DVDs that can then help them not just for the first few months, but the first 5 years of life.
Mm-hmm. Why do you care about breastfeeding so much, and why is breastfeeding beneficial to a child?
Sure. So those are 2 very complicated questions. I'll take the benefits of breastfeeding first because that might be shorter. Benefits of breastfeeding are not just for mother and baby. Obvious benefits come across to the infant both in health reasons for subsequent reduction in ear infections. A baby who's breastfed has like a 75% less chance of getting an ear infection than a formula-fed counterpart. Same with respiratory infections, diarrhea, illnesses. But then you do see pluses go over to the mother side, both in weight reduction, lack of hemorrhage right after birth, a direct correlation to reduction in breast cancer and ovarian cancer. And it's probably because of a combination of the hormonal factors, cleansing out the body. There's lots of different reasons, and we don't really know all the reasons behind them, but we do know that in the long run it is better for both mom, baby, and then quantifying it, we see a huge public health issue at hand that some mothers feel that it's not the pediatrician's job to tell them, but the pediatrician really just wants what's in the best for the infant long run. And what we know is that breastfeeding in that first year will get them off to the right start. Let's not talk about obesity. Let's not talk about dental issues when the kids are 5. Let's talk about it when we have the chance to change it. And that's what breastfeeding can do. Breastfeeding is not the magic pill. And that's what people always want to say, well, I breastfed my kid for 5 years and look at him. Well, there's other lifestyle choices, but it's setting them off into the right gate. My prime example of that actually is around the ear infection issue, and the ear infections can be highly genetic, but we know that an infant who is exclusively breastfed and has a genetic tendency to have ear infections, the playing field is actually leveled, and so then they are then considered to be not as at risk as they would have been before. So a child who might have gotten 10 ear infections may only get 2 now, so it helps in that. The public health dollars you see saved, moms and dads miss less work, less healthcare costs, and let's face it, in Merced County, where the majority of our children are on managed Medi-Cal, we need to find public health saving dollars where we can, and breastfeeding is one start of that.
I guess you don't have to buy formula if you breastfeed.
Correct. And there has been, WIC is always the elephant in the room because they have been a large formula distributor. They are the largest formula purchaser in the United States. They did make subsequent changes last October to both reduce formula that is given all around and then totally eliminate it for the first month of life if the mother is breastfeeding. And they've seen significant changes already. So you're seeing a federal toll start to take its place, and the push of the momentum now coupled with like Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign and now the new White House report that has specific indicators around breastfeeding.
So would you say that these things are indicators that the misconceptions about breastfeeding versus formula are now actually kind of being utilized, changing in the federal government?
Very much so. A couple years back, the federal government was actually commissioned to do a basic plight out to parents, and they actually were able to get a very well-known survey and social marketing company to do it pro bono. And the company said, we will do it pro bono if you guarantee you're going to use what we say. And what they found was that most parents overwhelmingly knew that breastfeeding was best. What they didn't know was the risks if they did not breastfeed. And most people don't want to talk about that. We're going to tell parents the risks of if you don't vaccinate your child. We're going to tell them why they need to use a car seat, but we don't ever talk to them about breastfeeding. Highly political issue that drums up lots of emotion, which is why it tends to be tabled and not talked about.
Why do you think it's so political?
The formula company is the second largest lobbying group next to tobacco, and they do it very well. So, for instance, when we have our statewide walks in August, the formula companies are there right before us. We had 2 legislative bills that made it clear to Arnold Schwarzenegger's desk last year. They were both vetoed. One of them, we were pretty sure it was going to be vetoed. The other, we had no expectation.
And what are these companies we're talking about?
Ross is one of them, and Enfamil, Similac. They're all formula making companies.
Do they just make formula, or do they make other products as well?
They make other products. The largest formula maker is actually owned by Nestle. And so you can actually Google Nestle, and you'll see a lot of quote Nestle, anti-Nestle campaigns just because of that. Nestle
owns, I think they own a bunch of
They
water
own everything.
companies.
Hershey's. I mean, they have their hands really in everything. They're actually one of the largest food companies now throughout the whole world. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to actually get something that Nestle does not have their hands into.
What are the ways you can promote a breastfeeding to a larger audience? Do you have any ideas?
Sure. Yeah, there is the social marketing, and Fresno County actually did do some very large billboarding a couple years back. Sides of buses, you see that now down in Tulare County. And on a broader scale, we take it back a step. We go to where the mothers are, both prenatally, where their kids are, and we take it into the doctor's offices. We take it into the public health offices, and we truly do turn it into a normalcy campaign. The question should not be, are you going to breast or bottle feed? The question should always imply, what is going to be best for your child, to open that question up. It should always be an open-ended question to say, what have you heard about breastfeeding, or how long do you intend to breastfeed?
Did you see a difference between, say, recent immigrants and people who've been here for a while, and why would that be?
Sure. So we do have an acculturation issue where a lot of, especially in the Hmong population, breastfeeding is the only way they know how to feed their families when they're in their countries. They come here and they largely believe that they white women bottle feed because that's what they see on TVs and in commercials and in pictures. And a lot of times, even then, when you see pictures of breastfeeding women, they're drab. They're not the glitz, they're not the glamour. So it's trying to pull the glitz and the glamour out of something that's very normal. Angelina Jolie, who was slammed for breastfeeding her twins, on the cover of different magazines. You'll never see the same for a mom bottle feeding her twins on a magazine, even though she showed absolutely nothing. And so we do use, well-known names that are willing to come forward and talk about why it was important to them to help create that normalcy, to help show those immigrant families that actually the richer you are and the whiter you are and the more educated you are, the more likely you are to breastfeed. So of course this is what you want to do. Britney Spears tried breastfeeding. She failed for many different reasons, but she tried. And so of course we're going to use that to our advantage. And companies know it. She wore a bravado bra and actually, wasn't always quiet about it. And so, of course, Bravado took that and ran with it because we know what sells, and we need to sell it as a culture.
And in terms of other folks who come from somewhere like, say, Mexico, is there a different dynamic working there?
There is a growing trend in different parts of the world where breastfeeding is being hit harder. Countries that have always typically breastfeed, now you're seeing the formula companies start to put their hands into places, go into the doctor's offices and the hospitals, prescription pads now pre-written with their information on it, so that when a mother takes it to the company to get it filled, it's automatically filled with theirs. Because in many companies, or in many countries rather, you actually have to have a prescription to go get formula. It's behind lock and key. It's not like it is here. It's not readily accessible, and it is truly treated as, this is the secondary way to feed your child.
Do you think that this is part of a reaction to maybe a growing kind of resurgence of the idea of breastfeeding in America and their need new markets?
Oh, very much so. They're finding new markets wherever they can. So, for instance, around the formula bags, hospitals have been pretty much getting rid of them because they realize that it's the first step and trying to do what they can. And so now you see formula companies going into places where they never have been before. Ultrasound offices, photographers' offices, and giving them away with free baby pictures and whatnot.
Well, that about wraps up our time. If you could just leave the audience with one kind of idea, one thought about breastfeeding, what would it be?
It's quick, it's easy, and it's a way to save money. And when it comes down to it, in the long run, it is what's best for your kid. And so that's what we need to be thinking about. Where is the reason we had this child? And what now can we do best to get them off to the best path? And early support is what does it. So not being able to afraid to reach out and not being afraid to question somebody that says, well, are you sure that's what you want to do? If that's what a mother wants to do, then she needs to push that point. And we're here to help her do that, and we're here to support them in whatever their goals are. If a mom tells me she wants to breastfeed X amount of weeks, I'm going to help her through that. And it should always be a woman's choice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This edition of Off the 99 is actually in conjunction with a three-part series by Danielle Gaines, my co-host. And so, Danny, tell us a little bit about why you did this series and where the ideas came from.
I did this series as part of a fellowship with the University of Southern California Annenberg School of Journalism and Communication. And they do health journalism fellowships, and I decided to look at obesity, and possibly in a new way. I decided to look at what it's like for people in different stages of life. And on top of that, I got for each story a new data set as it related to Merced. So there were new numbers on breastfeeding that weren't known before. The numbers from UC Merced about obesity and overweight prevalence in the Merced Union High School District were new. And then I also talked with Don Avila just because I thought his story was pretty cool, and he's our next guest.
Welcome to the show.
Hi,
Introduce yourself for our audience, please.
my name is Don Avila.
And tell us a little bit about kind of your effort to lose weight and where the idea sprang from originally.
Well, I've been overweight all my life. I've battled it for my entire life, basically. And in a nutshell, taking care of my father, he went through Alzheimer's, and dealing with that and seeing how basically fragile life is, how we have such a short span here. It's just a decision to make my life the best it can be. And the biggest thing was being overweight. So I had to conquer that. And that's just pretty much, I had to, like I told Danielle, pull everything out of inside me. Why? Why was I overweight? And seeing that, yes, I was addicted to food. So, and then went from there.
And when did you have that realization? How long ago?
Probably about 3 years ago.
3
We're
years.
talking about 2007, 2006, 2007.
And-
Obviously, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And you don't know how much you weighed. You have an idea in the
At the-
neighborhood of 500?
Or the
less?
biggest, I was over 4.
Okay.
I wasn't on the scale. The scale I've actually hit, what I've actually seen was like close to a 390. But I know I was bigger than that. I can, feel it in my bones and stuff. But yeah, there was a point where I couldn't walk. I can barely walk. I knew if I got any heavier, I'd have to get on one of those scooter things. So
And in 3 years, you've lost how much weight?
over 150.
Mm-hmm.
And built, just become a lot more fit. Being able to play tennis and play other kind of, just exercise in general. I wanted to get to the point where I can exercise, where I can get on the treadmill, because treadmills have a weight limit. So that was a huge jump for me. And then when I got under 300, that's a huge jump, or a huge accomplishment. So when I get under 2, that's going to be another huge one.
So what do you think were the factors that really helped you move from this really heavy weight to where you are now?
The biggest factor is just realizing my addiction to food. Why, at my biggest, why I play to food after eating it, those endorphins kick off and just say, why am I feeling good? Why is this giving me pleasure? And just going from there and just dealing with this, at that biggest, there isn't very much joy in life. So basically that was it, eating. So
where did you get some of these ideas? Were there any people or books or places that you went that really kind of helped you understand what was happening?
Well, I did get there was a college class about health, and there he would talk about what kinds of exercises to do. I got a lot from just, pieces here and there, nothing specific, but just pretty much just pieces, as you go. Everything I've done and lost has pretty much just been, trial and error. There was a lot of points where I was stuck, and then I find out new stuff, maybe online, maybe in a magazine, to incorporate that would help. So.
Did you consider gastric bypass or plastic surgery or something more drastic?
At my biggest, I did consider that, but I didn't have health insurance. I did, but they kind of they didn't want to. You had to go through a lot of steps, and I knew I had to get rid of it, so that was an option. But when I did have to look at myself, I knew I had, that there was an addiction there, and I knew 99% of this is between the ears. That you have to. It's not just eating less and exercising. There has to be a change within. So I know we have talked about how the gastropipes, it is good, but unless you deal with what's inside, you're gonna rebound back to the big person.
So, in other words, in a lot of ways, you think people kind of get stuck psychologically when they're overweight, as opposed to stuck physically. I mean, you think that's a big part of it?
It's depression. When it boils down to, it's just depression, and just the fact, you wake up, you look in the mirror, it's not a pleasant sight, and the only joy you pretty much go to is food, so it's a huge crutch.
What did you start doing when you first decided you're going to lose weight? You just said you're almost at the point where you'd be on a motorized scooter and you couldn't walk well. So how did you start exercising?
At the beginning, I had to tell myself small meals every 2 hours, and small meals would be like half a sandwich, something of that size, throughout the day. I started with there, and maybe even just walk around the house, and then when I was able to get on the treadmill, go slow with it, so, and a lot of water. Water's huge too, so.
Do you remember your first workout?
My first workout?
Like your first day when you were like, okay, today's the day that I'm gonna start losing weight for real. Do you remember what you did that day?
I wish I did, but it was kind of, there wasn't like a definite point, because it's a tug of war. Mm-hmm. There isn't like, I wish there was like a point, okay, this door opens, everything's magical gonna happen. But it's tug of war. Some days are better than others, but as long as you're doing as somebody had told me, as long as you do 85% good a day, and then you do that for a week, for a month, you're doing awesome, and you are going to lose the weight. It's not going to be perfect, but just as long as you just keep working.
And just in terms of your habits and interacting with family and friends, has it been hard to change your habits, or have these people around you kind of made it easier?
Actually, that's a real good question. It has made it hard, because dealing with family, being around family, they have the bad habits, which I had, or I still have. That's going to be with me forever. Being around it, those temptations are there, and that's a tough thing to battle. But bottom line, it takes my hand to put the food in my mouth. So, but it has been hard. Family, I'd like to say they help, but yeah, more in spirit than actual action.
And in terms of just your habits and what you eat, just give us a sense of what a day would be like now as opposed to before.
When now, I pretty much like a small meal in the morning when I wake up, within a half an hour after I wake up, water, and then I try to eat within 2 to 3 hours, and pretty much small meals, nothing specific. I wish I can get all these lean cuisines and stuff like that. I can't afford it, so you just try to stick with proteins, stay away from grains, stay away from rice, but pretty much like that throughout the day. Try to keep it small, exercise good, lots of water.
Do you, obviously you eat different foods because you've cut out some of the higher fat portions that you might have used to have, but have you experienced new foods in trying to lose weight? Have you tried, I don't know, fruits or vegetables or things you haven't had before?
More so vegetables, I like vegetables okay in the past, but now just trying to do vegetables differently. We have talked about being vegetarian and stuff. I do that differently. Try to stay away from, I'd say the grains, rice, whatever. But tortillas was huge in my family. Potatoes were huge. Trying to get away from the sodas. That was a huge thing too. I remember I quit that cold turkey. That was hard. And that was pretty much 20 pounds right off the bat, getting rid of the Pepsis out of my life.
What, so you're drinking Pepsis?
I used to drink
How many?
Probably about 10 a day.
Oh.
At least
That's
a 6-pack a day.
That's a lot of Pepsi.
Yeah. I try to stay away from it. I try to just strictly stick with water, because I noticed even what's that stuff called? Crystal Light. That tends to be a water retention, for me at least. So I just try to stick with water.
I met you at a local Biggest Loser competition
Yes.
at Merced College. And how many times did you win that? And could you explain what that was?
There was the local Biggest Losers goes to the Merced Community College Center, and they set it up like 2 or 3 times a year, and you go, I think it was like 8 weeks, I believe, and you check in pretty much every week on a Saturday, and the first Saturday you weigh in, the last Saturday you weigh in, and whoever loses the most inches and weight, they win. I've competed in the past year and a half. I competed in 4, and I've won 3, so that was a huge bonus. So
You win a little small pot of cash, right?
yes.
It's a good incentive.
That's a good incentive, but just winning too. Just be able to have your efforts.
And having kind of other people to kind of be a part of this, does that make it more of help you kind of try to lose the weight?
It does.
As opposed to just doing it by yourself.
It does. The camaraderie you get from the people out there, whether they lose weight or not, whether I lose weight or not, just the friendships you gain, and just pretty much fun. It's a lot more fun because the bulk of my weight was lost by myself, which is great. But having to be there every Saturday, having there be a deadline, and that's a good incentive to have.
So I showed up at the Biggest Loser one morning, and I handed out my business card to a bunch of people, and I thought for sure no one was going to contact me, because who really wants to talk about the fact that they're overweight in the newspaper and have a picture on the front page. You got back to me, and why?
Well, for probably about a month or 2 before this, I just have, I don't know, just a desire to help people, in my position, because I remember, how it felt. Just recently I took a trip, and I told you about that to North Carolina, and I was there about 5 years before, and I was probably about 50 pounds from my biggest, so I was about 350, and they showed me pictures, and it was just startling. It's startling to see myself like that, and I do remember how I felt. And when you had showed up, there was like, yeah, there's a way you may be able to help people, so.
And that ties in with what you want to do in the future. You and I have talked about your career aspirations. Why don't you tell people what you're thinking about doing?
I'd like to find a way to help people through this, and maybe like a counseling. And what I found out is that there's not much out there. It's not, because food addiction isn't, it's not regarded as one of the addictions yet, so it doesn't have the respect like alcohol or drugs do. But I'd like to become a counselor in that field. There is no field yet, but they said there is something opening to that. Mm-hmm. So
there's an ongoing debate about whether food addiction in itself is an eating disorder, just like anorexia or bulimia, which is binging and purging.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not just binging is an eating disorder. Have you gotten a lot of help? You're going to Merced College. Are they trying to help you carve out a new path, a new career type?
They want to help me, but they just pretty much go stumped. They pretty much just, whoa, there's nothing in that avenue. And I ask them if I want to get into drugs and alcohol. Yes, there's an avenue. There's jobs that way. From bulimia and anorexia, yes. But food addiction, they said no. There's nothing definite right now. But hopefully there will be.
And anything you just want to kind of leave people with in terms of what you've been through, or what you could impart to them about how to do the same thing?
It just, if somebody in my position, just keep fighting. There's no magic thing. Just keep fighting. Don't go for the quick fix, because the quick fix will rebound. Keep fighting, because there's not much joy, in being, severely obese. So hopefully somebody hears this and, it spurs them on to something.
You're listening to Off the 99, a weekly radio broadcast produced by the Merced Sun Star and KYOS 1480 AM. We can be heard weekly at 6 p.m. on Saturday and 6:30 a.m. on Sunday, or all the time at mercedsunstar.com. This show was produced by Jonah Owen Lamb and Danielle Gaines. We'd love to hear from you. Reach us at offthe99@mercedsunstar.com or by mail at 3033 G Street. This is Off the 99.